we began a few housekeeping items. Only the panelists are displayed or heard, but we do want to hear from you. You can ask questions during the session using the Q&A button on your Zoom panel, not in the chat. If they're put in the chat, we won't be able to see them. So please use the Q&A portion. And we will share a recording of this presentation as soon as possible after today's webinar. My name is Raquel Cloyd, and I manage business development and partnerships, as I said, here at Intellect. Our speaker today is Arshad Hashmi. He's lead trainer and auditor with Bureau Veritas. We're going to hear from him very shortly. Before we do hear from Arshad, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Intellect. We are an award-winning quality management and environmental health and safety software company built on a no-code platform and powered by a robust AI integration. We help companies automate quality processes, prepare for audits, and achieve their quality and compliance goals. Those goals include maintaining compliance with ISO, FDA, GXP, ITAR, OSHA compliance, and more. Whether you're in med device, automotive, biotech, manufacturing, you can rely on Intellect to help you to reduce operational risk, improve profitability, and increase revenue. We have over 30 applications for management standards that are ready to use out of the box, or you can configure and build out unlimited applications to meet any quality or operational need. Our system is compliant with several ISO standards out of the box, including 27001, which is today's highlighted ISO standard. If you'd like to see a demo of our QMS software solution, please visit us at intellect.com, or you can just type in demo into the Q&A portion of your Zoom panel, and we will reach out to you as soon as possible after today's session. Arshad, would you like to say a few words about Bureau Veritas?
Yes, so Bureau Veritas is a testing, inspection, and certification organization. It's quite old organization. It was created in 1828, and we specialize in all kinds of testing, inspection, and certification. We have around 8 business lines. We have around 1,500 offices, which are present in 140 countries. We have a total strength of around 80,000 employees. And alone auditors, we have around 7,400 auditors across the globe. So we specialize in quality, environment, health and safety, and enterprise risk management.
Wonderful. So today, Arshad is going to help you to ace your ISO 27001 audit by identifying the common pitfalls you may encounter and how to navigate them, explain the key things you need to consider before and during your audit, what you need to prioritize before your audit, the pros and cons of a virtual versus a remote audit, and what are the most frequent non-conformances and how do you prevent them. But before we begin the presentation, we want to launch a poll, and we want to know from you a couple of questions. So if there's a box that's going to pop up, the poll questions, there's a top question. If you scroll down the box, there's the second question. But the first one is, how are you currently organizing and storing documents needed for your internal or external certification audits? So whether that be you're kind of with paper and binders and literal filing cabinets, or maybe you're on Word docs or spreadsheets stored on a shared drive, maybe you have a electronic quality management software solution in place, or any other system. And then secondly, to which standards are you trying to achieve compliance with, or maybe you've already achieved certifications? We've got several ISO standards listed below. Just very curious to know, check all that apply. So we'll give everyone maybe 20, 30 seconds or so to answer both questions. Remember, there's the top question, and if you scroll down in the box, you'll see the second question. And we'd love to have as many of our participants as possible. That'd be great. I think we have about 70% participating so far. Just give a few seconds for the last few people to answer. That'd be greatly appreciated. Want to see where everyone's at currently. All right. Well, let's go ahead and I'll share the results of the poll. So it looks like we've got most people are using some sort of electronic document, whether it be Word docs, spreadsheets on a shared drive. We've got a good chunk who do have an EQMS in place already. And then about a third, are using paper and binders or filing cabinets. All right. And then we have some on other systems as well. and then standards that we're trying to certify to. So the vast majority, which we see all the time, is ISO 9001. So about 3/4 of you are certifying or have certified to that standard. And then about a third of you to 27,001. So welcome, you're in the right place for that. We've got some med device 13485, 14,001, and then another third about other. So we appreciate everyone for sharing where you're at. Let's see, next slide. So Arshad has pre-recorded his presentation earlier today. We're going to launch the recording, and then Arshad is going to be here, or is here, to answer your questions live. And we'll get to that Q&A after the recording. While we launch that recording, I wanted to share a fun fact. Arshad was one of our auditors when Intellect had our ISO audit last year. He made our auditing process very clear and made it a much less stressful experience than we thought it was going to be. So we highly recommend Arshad and Bureau Veritas.
Very good morning and good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all on this webinar on ISO 27001, Information Security Management System Auditing. And let me share my slides before I dive further into it. So without any further delay, a little bit about myself. My name is Arshad Hashmi, and I'm the lead trainer and auditor at Bureau Veritas Certification, North America. And I'm also the director and principal consultant to Core System Consultant. I'm a lead auditor and trainer in a number of ISO standards, which includes information security, business continuity, quality environment, health and safety, energy management, asset management, and few other standards. I have a total of 27 years of experience of providing consulting, training, and auditing services throughout the globe. I'm a profession by engineer, and then I have certain qualifications, certified information security manager and certified in risk and information system control by ISACA. I did almost 140 consulting assignments where I implemented all these international standards, including 27,001 in almost all type of industrial sectors. I did almost 2,000 man days of training, and in just last 10 years, it was 1,200 man days of training. So it's almost like spent 4 years doing the training in last 10 years. I have 800 man days of audits, and I provided my services throughout the globe in a lot of countries. The major portion of my services constitute the 27,001. I majorly audit the 27,001 standard, and I do the trainings, a lot of trainings for 27,001. So the learning objective. Now, the learning objective, I like to align my learning objectives with respect to your expectations, and I believe this should fall under one of these bullets or some of these bullets. So you are here to understand what are the key considerations in a 27,001 audit. So when you're going for a 27,001 audit, what you should consider before you apply for certification and what should be the area of focus. Then I'm going to cover the on-site versus remote versus virtual audit. We have heard a lot about these terms. There are different type of audits, so I'll just brief you through that so that you'll have basic understanding how it all goes. And then focus area from an auditor perspective. So what the auditor is looking for, that will really give you some true insight from the auditor standpoint and what are the auditor's intent as well. So there are a few interesting slides that I'm gonna talk about this thing and share my experience with you. Then the common issues faced during the audits. So this will really help you and the auditor as well to keep yourself aligned with the whole objective of the whole process. So I'm going to talk about the common issues faced during the audit, and then most occurring non-conformities and how to prevent from them. So based on this expectations, which was also the objective of this webinar, I developed certain agenda points. And those agenda points comprise of, first, I will take you through the certification process. So I'll give you the whole overview about how the certification goes and what are the different stages into certification and what we look for. And then I'm going to talk about the stage 1 and stage 2 audit. So how it is different and what are the objectives of both the stages and how it all leads to the certification. Then I'm going to talk about the on-site versus virtual versus remote audits. What is the difference? How do we use different terms? And where and who will decide that which audit will be done at your organization? Then key clauses for the audit. So 27,001. So this is a very interesting and very insightful slides, which will be talking in terms of the clauses. So you guys can note down those clauses, which will help you big time when you go back to your organization. And then auditor's perspective. So how the auditor perceive all of that and what exactly auditor is looking for. So that will also help you in aligning yourself with the auditor's expectations. Issues during an audit, what we face every now and then in every sort of an audit. And then what are the most common and recurring non-conformities, which I see almost in every organization. So as an auditor, what are the most challenging areas that we come across? And then prevention from common non-conformities. So what you can do, how you can prevent from all of that. And then lastly, I'm going to touch base on the question and answer sessions with you. So let's dive into it. The certification process. When you reach the point of certification, you need to contact a certification body. Bureau Veritas is one of the certification bodies which offers ISO 27001 certification. So you initially contact Bureau Veritas through an application. And there is a process which happens, which is called contract review, in which we have to evaluate that what is the scope of your ISMS certification. And as per the scope and the complexity of the process and the size of the organization and the sites that are included, we assess the time scale and we prepare the audit team. Once we do that, then we conduct the first audit, which is called the stage 1 audit. The stage 1 audit is based on the documentation audit. It does not produce any result for certification. And then the auditor gives you findings vis-a-vis your documentation, but the auditor does not go into the details of implementation at this point. And then you need to address those findings vis-a-vis your documentation. There is a gap between stage 1 and stage 2, which is of max 90 days. Now it's up to you that how quickly you address those findings of the auditor of stage 1 and call the auditor back. You can call them in a week's time, in a 2 weeks' time, depending upon the availability, or a maximum like in 90 days, you need to call them back to come and do the stage 2 audit, subject to the resolution of the findings of stage 1. The stage 2 audit is basically called the implementation audit, where the auditor checks the whole implementation and the whole system. And the result of stage 2 audit is the certification. The certification is valid for 3 years, and it is followed by normally 2 surveillance audits after every 12 months. It can be 5 surveillance audits as well, depending upon the size and the sites that are included in the scope of your certification. But then there are surveillance audits, which happens, and at the end of the 3-year cycle, there will be a recertification audit, which is basically just like the stage 2 audit, which is as detailed as like the stage 2 that we did. But the stage 1 happens once in a lifetime of the organization if the organization is staying attached with one certification body. So this cycle keeps on going, and the company is issued another certificate, which is valid for another 3 years, and then followed by 2 surveillance and then recertification. Now, let's talk about the stages. So the 2 stages that I mentioned in the previous slide, even before those 2 stages, there is one other audit which is optional, and we call it pre-audit or gap analysis. Now, this pre-audit or gap analysis can also be done at 2 stages. One is right before you are applying for certification audit. This is done on the request of the client, and this is just like a combination of stage 1 and stage 2 audit without any result. So what happened is that, and the other area that you can do a pre-audit or a gap analysis is at the start of the project. When you're thinking of implementing 27001, you can request us and we can come and we can do a gap analysis to tell you the gap between your company's existing system and the system required by the 27001. So what are the gaps? And it helps the organization to familiarize themselves with the certification audit approach as well, if done before the certification. And this is an optional thing. So the benefit of this kind of an activity is that that organization gets the feel of the main audit, Plus, they get to know about where do they stand vis-a-vis the requirement of the 27001 standard. Nevertheless, the mandatory part is the stage one documentation audit. And stage one comprises of all these activities, which basically includes the validation of the scope. So whatever the scope that you have given us on paper in the application, this is the first stage where as an auditor is come and will verify that all the documentation that you have developed and all the ISMS that you have implemented, is that true for the scope that you have presented on the application? And that's where they finalize the scope of certification as well. So there's minor amendment in the scope wording as well, depending upon the audit process. So the auditor is basically goes through the documentation and verifies if everything is developed and all the documents are there as required by the 27001 standard. And in addition to the verification of the documentation, the auditor also verifies the two activities. One is called an internal audit and the other one is called a management review. So this is a requirement of stage one that the auditor needs to verify, in addition to the documentation, two activities, which are management review and internal audit, without which the auditor will not proceed for the stage two audit. Some of the other benefits of stage one is that the auditor get to know about the company, and really auditor knows the company inside out by the time they do the stage two audit. They familiarize with the facility if applicable, because companies are working virtually as well. They exist on cloud or the co-locations, the servers are located there. So there's no physical premises, but if there is, then the auditor get familiarized, and then they can well plan the stage two audit. Now, stage two audit is the main audit, which is called the implementation audit. Now, in the stage two, whatever the documentation that you have shown in the stage one, which is aligned with the requirements of the 27001 standard, now the requirement is go ahead and show the implementation. Has it been practiced by the people on the ground? Are people aware about this system? And is it producing results? Are you achieving the objectives out of implementing all your information security policies and procedures and objectives? And are you doing it consistently or not? So stage two focuses on the implementation of 27001, and it covers all the 27001 clauses, and it verifies the implementation and the effectiveness. And effectiveness will be in terms of the improvement within the information security management system. So the two key questions of the stage two that the auditor is going to verify and will focus upon: is the system implemented? And if the system is effective. Effective means, is it producing results? Are you improving vis-a-vis information security? What issues you had before? And are you lessening those issues because of the implementation of 27001? Were you able to lessen those issues? So this is what stage two audit is. And then let's talk about the term that we earlier used, the on-site versus remote versus virtual audits. Now, as the name implies, on-site audit is basically the audit on the site of the client. So if the client has a physical site, the auditor will visit and will do the audit at the client premises. Auditor will be physically present on the client site. So auditor will come actually and do the audit, and document records and process reviews, site tour, interviews will all be done in person by the auditor. So auditor will be doing it in person physically by being present on the client site. That is called an on-site audit. Now there's another term, again, as the name implies, it's called remote audit. Now remote audit is basically the audit of the same site, but auditor is not visiting. So the client has a physical site, but auditor is not visiting that site, and auditor is doing it remotely. And the interviews and the document reviews and everything will be done through Teams or Zooms or whichever the digital meeting platforms are available. And good for stage one audit. So when you are doing the document reviews, it is really good to do the remote audit. It saves time of traveling and everything. And it serves the purpose as well. And depending upon the nature of the business that you are in, the stage two can also be done remotely. And I'll just highlight that which is the deciding factor for these kind of audits. The third term is called the virtual audit. Now, this is for those companies which does not exist. Does not exist means they exist virtually. People are working remotely. They're having servers which are located at co-locations with third parties, or they're all having everything on the cloud. So there is no physical premises to come and audit. Now, in that case, the concept is the same as remote auditing, but in addition to the auditor, the auditees, the company personnel, they are also sitting remotely and they're all working remotely. So there's no point of really meeting with the auditee, and the interviews and everything is done over the digital meeting tools. And interestingly, they can be people, employees, which are sitting outside US. So there's no boundary to the virtual audit thing, but they need to be present in the time zone of the US as per their own official working time zones, and they can be audited virtually. Now, the decision made is by the certification body that which type of audit will be done. There is a technical function within each certification body. They decide, and that depends upon a number of factors, which may include of course, first is if the company exists or not. And if the company exists, then what's the nature of their business? And if can be done remotely or if can be done hybrid as well. So if there's a physical company, then part of it can be done remotely and part of it needs to be done on site. So that is all decided by the technical function of a certification body. Now let's talk about the key elements. And there I really like you all to take notes because this is an experience-based slide. And this is what we face every now and then when we go for 27001 audit. So just to give you an overall view, it is not within the domain of this topic, but this is how the 27001 standard looks like. I'm sure everyone may be knowing that as well, or most of you. So it is a 10 clause structure, and out of that 10 clause, 4 till 10 are auditable clauses where the requirements are laid down. In addition to 4 till 10, there is an Annex A, which has best security practices, which are called information security controls. So in the latest 27001 version, those best security practices are defined in 4 domains through 93 controls. And these are those domains. So organizational, people, physical, technology controls, all these sum to 93. So there are 4 basically chapters, and within that 93 controls are defined. And the correlation between the two is that as a result of risk assessment, you need to select controls. Wherever the gaps are, wherever the loopholes are, you need to select controls. So basically on clause number 6 of the main standard, then the Annex A controls kicks in. That's where you need to select those controls and you need to implement those controls. And basically you need to justify those controls, that why are you using them? Because of the risk. So this is the overall view, and I'm going to discuss the next slide, which is the prime focus, should be the prime focus of an organization before the 27001 audit. And that will be in terms of either the main clauses, which is 4 till 10, or in terms of these clauses, which is A5 till A8. So the first thing that as an organization you need to focus upon is the main and core activity of the whole ISMS, which is the foundation of the whole ISMS, and that is information security risk assessment and risk treatment. And I tell you what, I still find a number of issues with this risk assessment and treatment, and we as an auditor, we really have a very tough time in risk assessment and treatment because people may not have complete knowledge, or they do not have the correct understanding, or there are a lot of issues with respect to the criteria that they have selected. Sometimes people go into the tools. Sometimes they do not have the basic concepts of the risk assessment and treatment. So this is one of those areas where you really need to strengthen yourself as an organization, because auditor would be heavily, heavily interested in these clauses. And this basically creates the basis for the whole investment in the information security. So you need to have good knowledge, you need to develop good risk assessment, and somebody really need to go detail with the risk assessment process So that is something you need to really focus upon. Then applicable legal and regulatory requirements. Again, companies working, they're going for certification and they have no clue which requirements are applicable vis-a-vis they're working. There are a number of laws, and the laws are applicable with respect to the geography that you're in. So you need to understand in US, we have different laws, different privacy laws applicable state-wise even. California has different laws. And if you are working, if you're located in North America, Canada has their own laws. So you need to understand those legal and regulatory requirements vis-a-vis information security with respect to the geography that your unit is located in. And these are the clauses which focuses on that, the class 4.2 and A 5.31. Whenever I write A, that means I'm referring to the annex controls. Then you as an organization should focus on asset management. Now, this is again one of the weak areas that I find, and I'm going to discuss that again. I'll come back to it. But you need to understand what are the requirements, how to maintain the asset inventories at the organization, how to have the return of the assets process, and if you're taking assets off premises, you need to define all of those processes, and you need to really make sure that they are complied after defining. Then access management, and here the access is not limited to logical; it's about physical access as well. So who will need to access what, and the whole process is defined on need to know basis. So one is the logical access, of course, on all your IT infrastructure, on all your databases, operating systems, applications, and everything that is there to your files. These are all logical access, but it also include the physical access as well. So how do you manage the physical access and the logical access? You really need to pay attention to that because this is going to play a very, very important role in your 27001 audit. Then we have supplier management. Now, this is one of the areas which I feel is not really been well understood. And in today's world, when you're having all this cloud working and there's co-locations, and then there are suppliers who are working as to support your cloud function or to support your co-locations. And then there are other suppliers which are critical suppliers for your business continuity. The information security requirements are not well addressed. You really need to look into those matters. And then there are clauses, there are requirements which talks about monitoring of those suppliers. So that is one of the areas that you should look deep into it. Technology controls. Now, very interestingly, the whole AA domain is about technology control. And since one of the misperception about the information security is that it talks about IT security, which is only a subset. Like in case of any unit which is not selling IT, the IT act as a custodian and the business information lies outside the IT. So this is like a misperception because of which a lot of focus is on the technology control. So the good side of it is that organizations are well prepared on the technology side, but the downside of it is that they are lacking on the management and the governance of that IT side. So they need to pay attention to it. But the technology controls are normally well implemented and well understood by the organizations. Then the internal auditing process. So especially the IT organizations, they think that the IT audit is equivalent to the information security audit, which is not correct. Information security is a much more bigger domain. It contains all the, as I showed you the standard, all the primary clauses of the standard plus the annex. So we need to understand that, and you need to pay attention and strengthen your ISMS internal audit. And then lastly, the management review, which is basically the management clause and the management role in the whole ISMS is um, evident through this management review. So management review, and this is a pretty straightforward clause. It has certain requirements. If you can discuss all those agenda points, that will force you to keep the rest of the system intact. So this is a pretty straightforward clause, but it is highly value addition clause in the whole ISMS. Then let's talk about the auditor's perspective. Now, the auditor's perspective, I've divided in three domains so that you can really understand what the auditor is looking for when they're visiting an organization. So the first focus of the auditor is during stage one, and they are looking for all the documents. So standard uses the term documented information, and there are further details to it which I would not like to go into. But the primary thing that the auditor is looking for is, have you developed or has the organization developed all the documentation as required by the standard? And if they are correct, it's not just that you are writing 5 threads and you are calling this is a risk assessment and says you are calling it a risk assessment, auditor will accept it. No, it will take the mark that you have developed a risk assessment, and then it will question the adequacy of it. It will question the correctness of it and completeness of it. So this is one of the areas or the auditor focus during the stage one. Then the statement of applicability. This is one of the requirements of the standard, which basically justifies the implementation of all the controls that you are having in Annex A. So auditor will be heavily focused on statement of applicability because that will define his or her stage two audit. So you need to be on top of this statement of applicability, one internal audit and one management review. So stage one has a requirement that you cannot proceed for stage two unless you have developed all the documentation, statement of applicability, which is also part of the documentation. Plus, you must have done one complete internal audit and one management review. Unless you have not done these activities, you cannot be able to proceed for stage two. So these are the areas that auditor will be looking for. And then during the stage two, the auditor would be, of course, looking for the implementation and the effectiveness. Effectiveness is in terms of producing results. And the implementation and effectiveness, they verify through a number of means by looking at the actual process, by interviewing the people, by looking at the transactions and all of that, and what you have improved. So your relativity in terms of your status, like what issues you were having before and how much you have improved upon after implementation of the ISMS, that is what the auditor will be focusing upon. Last thing is the awareness. They would be really looking if the people know about this ISMS or not. So most of the time it happens that some of the, which we call CISO, like Chief Information Security Officer or a team is working, but then has not gone down the line and people are not well aware about the ISMS. That is the auditor's top focus will be that has it been practiced by the people on the ground or not. Then during surveillance, what they do is that they go by the consistency and improvement overall maturity of the SMS. So when they come for the surveillance, now you're done with the stage two. Now you can look at the consistency and you can check on the consistency that is it consistent and are they following the standard over the period of time or not. Then let me tell you something about the auditor's intent. Now, this is one of those slides which is really not written anywhere in the books. So what you need to understand with auditor's intent is that first of all, let me put a line to it. Auditor is not coming to find fault and fail the organization. A lot of people think that auditor is looking for non-conformity. No, that's a misconception. It is not like that. Rather, auditor is coming for conformity, looking for conformity, and wants to help the organization in getting ISO 27001 certificate. So that is the real intent of a professional auditor. And they are coming and they are advocating your case to the certification body, to the technical function of the certification body, that you are eligible to get certified. And in that process, if they find any non-conformity, if they find any deviation from the requirement, then it will be reported as a non-conformity. So the last two bullets really sets the theme of the whole audit process, and it really depends upon how well you are aligned and how well you are keeping a relation and how well you are keeping yourself transparent with the auditor. So if you have done it correctly, if you there's nothing to hide basically. So the more you can stay transparent with the auditor, the more chances you'll have a seamless audit and will get through with the audit process. Now, what are the issues that are faced during the audit? So one of the biggest issues is the lack of understanding. People have called us and only 2, 3 people know about the ISMS, which has implemented the whole thing, but none of the other organization and the people who were involved, they even did not get any formal training on on information security management system. So they do not have the understanding about the ISO 27001, which includes risk assessment and treatment. They severely lack on that. Statement of applicability, inaccurate selection of controls, internal auditing. And then the other issue, as I told you earlier as well, is awareness. People are really not on board. So they have implemented the standard, but company personnel are not on board. And the level of implementation. Now, this is the key. When you are calling a certification body, you need to make sure that you have implemented and have been using the system for some time. So a lot of time, what we find is a lot of policies and procedures just approve or in process of approval, and recently or halfway implemented, and they have called the certification body. The certification body or the auditor will not have any chance then to raise a non-conformity on these kind of scenarios. So this is what we face every now and then, and the best way and the common non-conformities are related to risk assessment and treatment. As I've been emphasizing this a lot of time earlier as well, that people may not have the understanding. If they have the understanding, they have not applied the correct criteria. They have not considered the real threats to their information security, and they may have copied and pasted from some other organization and things like that. So you really need to do a critical thinking on this process, and you need to think out of the box that what exactly is impacting your product and services and how your information can be impacted. And then based on that, you need to do it in actual terms. Then asset management. Yeah, we find that organizations are weak in that. Even if they define the process, they fail to implement those processes. Supplier management. Yes, this is again one of the neglected areas, and every now and then, and as I said, that with all the technological advancement, with all the cloud computing and all the co-location and everything, and as companies are more getting dependent on the suppliers, this is one of the neglected areas. There's no information security address in the supplier agreements and things like that. So you really need to focus on these, and these are common non-conformities. Access management, review of user access rights, removal of access to third parties on company assets, clouds, or co-locations, etc. How do you provide it? There are third parties who are accessing the co-locations and the servers of the organization, but organization has not defined them within their process, within their system. So it's an understanding that they can access it. That's fine, but it's left to be defined in the process. So this is what we need to look into, and then people relocate, people changes, people got terminated or leave the organization. Then what about their user access? What about their physical access? What about their logical access? Have they been revoked or not? And are they being done on timely basis or not? So access management is a real issue. And we as an auditor, we see every now and then number of issues. Configuration management. So if there are development and testing environment, then the segregation of those environments, who is moving the builds between those environments, how you are doing the testing, and how, if the live data has been used, how you are doing the masking on those live data, and how you're making sure that nothing can be interpreted or any PII or anything can be interpreted out of that testing data. So these are all the issues that we face every now and then. And then storage media management. Yes, handling of and disposal of the storage media, especially if the storage media is going outside premises. So you really need to pay attention to those areas. These are the common areas where we raise non-conformities. Awareness, as I told you, that this is one of the things we every now and then we found people not being well aware about the process. And document control. So when you are establishing a new system, the document and the versioning control and the document change management, this is all too important, and you really need to go deep into it. Now, how to prevent from these non-conformities? So these are again experience-based things, and the first and foremost is that you need to assign persons for the project. It's a team effort. So you cannot just pick 3 or 4 people and assign them. No, you need to involve the people, but you need to assign a team, and it's not a one person's job. So basically, that will have views from other areas of the organization, and that will streamline your system better. Then understanding of the 27001 requirement. This is one of the keys. People may not have the understanding of the requirement and the understanding of the controls in NXA, and that creates a lot of issues. So good understanding, correct understanding is the key. Don't try to go with your previous knowledge or that you know by reading it. No, do get the advice of an expert, because that will help you in keeping yourself aligned. So, and there are a lot of online projects, even online trainings available. So, whichever the source that you feel comfortable, even if it's available on YouTube as well for free, whichever the source that you can feel comfortable, but do make sure that you know the right things before you get them into the working part. Assigning process and risk owners. So this is again a key, and I would not go into the details of that, but the process owners may not be the risk owners. That is the difference that the organization need to understand. A lot of issues come from this misunderstanding, and a lot of issues can be resolved if we define and we ascertain the responsibilities correctly. So assign the correct process owners and the risk owners. And then, yes, so very, very important. Don't just rush for the certification. What I've seen a lot of time is that there is a KPI going on at the organization by 2024 August. You have to get the certification. Now, systems get approved just first week of August, and they have applied for certification. This will not bring any result. Rather, this will delay your certification. You will have non-conformities, which will take for a lot of time in resolution, and that will delay the whole part of certification. So make sure that you have given time for the implementation and have brought some consistency before you apply for certification. Um, Internal auditing, very, very important. Do not assume that since you are IT auditor, you know internal auditing for 27001. That is not correct. The 27001 has its own dynamics. Maybe the auditing process may be right, but unless you do not get the 27001 knowledge, you would not be able to audit 27001. So you need to understand the scenario, the sensitivity of this topic, and you need to give due importance and acquire the required knowledge. Then do an effective internal audit. That will automatically bring a lot of improvement within the organization, because even before the auditor is coming, you already know where do you stand. That will help you big time. And then effective management review. Now, this is the process where I would say the management gets involved. And as written down by the 9.3 clause of the standard, if you are following all those agenda points and actually discussing it in true sense, that will keep the whole ISMS intact, because that discusses the whole performance of the whole information security management system. So these are the ways you can prevent from those common non-conformities. With that, I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to hand it over to Rakul, and we'll move to the question and answer session.
All right. Thank you so much, Arshad. We are going to be getting to the Q&A in a minute. If you haven't already, please take the time to put your questions for Arshad in the Q&A portion of your Zoom panel. Again, not in the chat, or else we won't see them there. So we will get to that Q&A. We're going to also give some contact information for Arshad as well. But first, I wanted to let everyone know that we have a referral program. If you know a colleague who would benefit from a system, quality management system like ours, you can earn from anywhere from $100 to $5,000 if they become a customer of Intellect. There's a link at the bottom of the page there. You can go to intellect.com and find the referral link for that, or contact us at intellect.com. Arshad has generously offered a discount on his consulting services now through the end of April. You can get 25% off an hourly consult with him. Bureau Veritas is one of the leading auditing and certification bodies out there. His contact information is there below. I also wanted to make everyone aware that we have another webinar coming up next month on May 22nd, Guerrilla Tactics for Quality Leaders. Registration is also at intellect.com. And again, if you'd like to see a demo of our software, you can use your QR code, hold up your phone, and go to our demo page to request a demo. You can visit us at intellect.com, or just type in demo in the Q&A portion, and we will contact you as soon as possible after the webinar. So we are now going to jump into the Q&A. We have had some questions pre-submitted ahead of time that we're going to address first, but please put your questions in the Q&A portion of your Zoom panel, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before we are out of time. All right, Arshad, the first question we had for you is, from a customer of Intellect, a new customer. So they had mentioned they are transitioning from 2013 to 2022. At this point in time, they are done with a readiness audit. Any pointers or tips on transitioning and managing the changes in the standard and Annex A would be appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Rakul. So, James, the one who questioned. So, first of all, let me give you an overview of the transition between the previous 2013 to 2022 version. There has not been much changed in the main standard except for one of the clauses, which is 6.3. They added it, which is change management in the main management system portion, which is 4 till 10 class. Okay, with the NX, yes, from 114, they've gone to 93 controls and they've added few controls and have removed certain others and have merged few other controls. So now remember this thing, 27,002 is not the standard. The auditable part is only the 27,001. So 27,002 and the NXA. So NXA shows you what to be done. How it is to be done, that's up to the organization. So anything that is written in 27,002 is not auditable. That is all coming up as a guideline. You can adapt that and you can understand better. You can get insight into the controls. Those are the NXA controls through 27,002. But nevertheless, 27,002 is not an auditable standard. The auditor will not raise a non-conformity if something is suggested to be documented for a control in 27,002. So I hope I've made this clear. That's company's call perfectly. And you also like to refer another clause, which is 7.5.1b, again, 7.5.1b, which specifically tells the company to develop the documentation as per the business needs. So besides the requirement of the standard, if you are developing any other standards, any other documentation, that's up to the organization and as per the business need of the organization. So it's not mandatory unless it is not written in the annex. Anything in the 27,002, that's only for the guidance. I hope I've answered your question. Yes, Rakul, the next question.
Yes, so there was another part to James's question, or another question in there. They are going to be implementing Intellect, our new customer of ours, starting in mid to late April. Their 27,001 2022 certification audit is at the start of July. So implementing in April, certification audit at the start of July. What impact will this have on their preparedness for the audit, and what benefits will they gain? Okay, so that is a question I think regarding our software. So I'm going to, James, put you in touch with your account manager to directly get you some help on that. Okay, next question is from Faisal. We're interested in learning more about the practical implementation challenges organizations face during ISO 27001 audits and how they overcome them.
Yeah, so I think I've covered this during my slides when I was showing you the slide regarding the key clauses. So I think that was pretty much answered. That pretty much answered that thing. Just in a nutshell, it was the main challenges goes around the information security, risk assessment and treatment, access management, asset management. That's what I also gave in my slide. That was pretty much covered during my slides.
Okay, perfect. Faisal has a couple more questions. The next one is, could you provide insights into the latest trends or updates in ISO 27001 audits, especially regarding compliance requirements or best practices?
Okay, so with the new standard, because this is more structured, the way they have given those 4 domains, which are like organizational, physical, people, and technology, so that has really impacted the auditing style. And we can now audit in a much more structured way as compared to the previous one, where it was all scattered throughout the whole 114 controls. So it's now much more structured, and we are doing it in a structured way. Nevertheless, not much of the impact on the management side of it, because there has not been much changes between the 4 till 10 clauses. So on the NX side, yeah, we are going more structured way.
Okay, perfect. And Faisal, you had a question about the role of technology, such as automation or specialized software, in streamlining ISO 27001 audit processes. I can take that question for you. Our QMS applications help you to comply with specific clauses in ISO 27001, I'll give a couple examples. Clause 4.4 requires processes and their interactions to be identified. We have diagrams and flowcharts to help with this. Or clause 6.2 requires you to document your information security objectives. I believe our document control, risk management, and environmental management apps help with that. And there are other clauses in there for operational planning and control, performance evaluation, and internal audits to the updates of ISO 27001 2022. So again, if you want some more information on how our software can help you, you can type in demo into the Q&A portion or go to intellect.com and we can get those answers for you. Next question from Faisal for Arshad. How do organizations effectively maintain compliance with ISO 27001 standards between audit cycles? Any tips for continuous improvement in this area?
Yeah, so that's a good question, by the way, that after the certification, how do you maintain it? So there are a few processes that you really need to focus upon. One is the implementation of controls. And again, with respect to the implementation of the controls, one of the processes that I like to highlight is the incident management. So how are you catering for those incidents and how you are doing the corrections and the corrective action and the root cause analysis. So that is one of the areas that you need to focus upon. There's another clause of the standard which you also need to focus is 9.1. It talks about the monitoring and measurement of the performance of the ISMS. So that is again one of the important clauses that you need to focus upon. How have you defined your performance of the ISMS? How would you measure? Which are the parameters, like in terms of number of incidents, number of high, medium, and low level incidents, number of non-conformities, number of supply deviations, number of recommendations that is made, and other like number of like downtime. How much is the downtime? How much is the virus issues or any attacks or any failures within the security? Any physical failures, physical security breaches, or human errors. So you can define all those parameters and you can define the issues in terms of you can define the parameters in terms of the issues that are happening at the organization, and then you can monitor them over a period of time. So this 9.1 combined with your incident management, which is again your 10.2 clause, and few of the annex controls, which also talks about the incident management, really sets the pace that how you are going to monitor. And now this all is on daily basis, then coupled with your periodic internal audits and management reviews. So this kind of a combination will really monitor your whole performance of the ISMS, and then you do the internal audit as well, which is systemic on a periodic basis, and then you review all of it in the management review, which really keeps the whole process intact.
Okay, thank you. Faisal has a final question. Any case studies or real world examples showcasing successful ISO 27001 audit outcomes and strategies behind them?
Yeah, I think that question is out of the domain of this webinar. So if Faisal can send me on my email, I would like to answer it there.
Okay, and we had a couple of questions I think are also a little bit outside the scope regarding TISAX requirements and just general risk across the board. I encourage you to please contact Arshad at his email address, and he can help you offline. And then we have some other questions that were submitted live in our Q&A portion. Arshad, do you have a preference of what you'd like to answer first, or I can go ahead and field some questions to you?
Yeah, so the first question is, I believe the maximum gap between stage 1 and stage 2 is 6 months and not 3 months as mentioned in the video. No, it is 3 months, but then the certification body, they give some grace period. So that depends upon the policy of the certification body, but by the book, it is 90 days between stage 1 and stage 2. And they mention it in their contract as well, that how much is the gap between stage 1 and stage 2, and then they give some grace period. Should the risk treatment procedure be conforming to ISO, or we can choose a personalized framework that was modified to use specific standards in part? So as I understand, ISO does not define how you're going to do the risk treatment. They just define what process you need to do, what elements you need to do, and then you need to devise your own process as per your own business needs. So you can do it in plain Excel sheets, you can adapt a methodology, you can do it on a tool. That's that's absolutely your call. It's not the standard which defines that you need to go by the technology. No. So absolutely, you have a lot of flexibility as long as you can maintain the integrity and adequacy of that process. Standard is fine as well with that, and so is the auditor. Then we have another question. What happened when a process has been changed prior to the audit, but at the time of the audit, nothing has completely gone through the entire process? So as I understand, I think you're talking about the change management. Um, and but at the time of the audit, nothing has completely gone through the entire process. Okay, so you said that that process has not been implemented. Now it depends. It depends which process we are talking about. So if that's a minor issue, if that's a minor process, then it may not impact. But let's suppose if you are changing the process of risk assessment and treatment, or if you are discussing if you are showing internal audit. So again, that depends. If the previous audit or the previous process evidence is there, and I can evaluate the process integrity through the previous record, then I will mark it as an observation because you have just changed it. And the as per the new process, there's no record. But then as per the previous process, the record is there. So I will evaluate that record and then I'll mark it to be audited in the surveillance audit. So you have done the change management a few days before the audit. That's perfectly fine. That's part of the process. And you're not able to show me the record as per the new process. That's also fine as long as the previous record for the process is available and I can audit that part. I hope that answered the question.
All right, thank you. That is all we have time for today. Appreciate everyone for joining us. We will send a recording of the session as soon as possible after the webinar. Again, feel free to contact Arshad with any further questions. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.